الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين. جزاكم الله khairan again for joining the class this week. So before talking about today's content, which is we will be finishing up the last inflection, which is al-jazm. This should not take us very long, and then after that we will have a quick review, and then I will send you the quiz questions, inshallah. But before starting, I just wanted to mention, um, I want to give you a few stories of myself when I was studying. So when you go back to the to the Muslim countries and you study with shuyukh, um, these madaris, they don't you don't have to pay anything. They don't charge you. You just go and start studying. At least the ones that I went to. But what something you do is the sheikh will ask you. Each person will have something to do for the sheikh. Um, and for example, what my first teacher, I was in charge of watering his plants and his trees. So every time I would finish, he would tell me, "Okay, now it's your turn. Go do your job." Uh, which was it was just just watering. The act of watering his plants and trees was an act of was very enlightening. Was very pleasurable. My other shuyukh, one of them, I typed one of his books for him. The other shuyukh, another shuyukh, I was in charge of whenever he was going to teach a new book. I was in charge of taking that book and copying it and making sure there are enough copies that he could distribute. So each so there's I mean, the reason I ask you to share these videos is from the same for the same reason, uh, and it is may Allah protect all of us. May Allah protect all of you. May Allah grant all of us tawfiq. And this is in no way I'm not suggesting that anyone may fall under this category, but one of the reasons the teachers used to do that was to first, they still do it right now, is to first to make sure that the student stays committed, and second, to make sure that the student does not have any ego, saying, "Oh, why is the teacher asking me to do this? I shouldn't be doing this. He's so weird." Because these are thoughts of shaitan that go through your mind, right? And so the reason I kept on pushing last night, I wanted to set the stage for this conversation today. To have this, to say what I am saying right now. So this is not something I'm planning to do all the times, but every once in a while I will push you. So I just want to give you a heads up. And this is not something I have not told you before. One of the requirements of the class was to share and watch my videos, right? So I'm not telling you to do anything that I have not told you. And inshallah, we will all uh, stay within the boundaries of brotherhood. Even though I am teaching you Arabic, I'm still your brother, nothing else, right? So, but these are the things that I should have mentioned from the beginning, because I do mention these things in my other classes. And I always mention that I will do things the way I was taught by my teachers, and I do not ask my students about their affiliations or what their aqidah is, what their madhab is. I don't really care. What I ask my students is for them to respect the way I do things, and if they feel like the way I do things is not something they agree with, they can find a different teacher. There's definitely nothing wrong with that. Not every teacher is, it's sometimes students and teachers just are not compatible, right? So this is just, I should have mentioned this from the beginning, but I just wanted to mention it now. And I am open to suggestions, but please let's make sure that this role of student teacher is not reversed, because I have gone through years of studying under teachers. Right, when I set out on teaching, I am not looking for someone to teach me. I'm not looking for someone to do everything from scratch again and start breaking my ego. Alhamdulillah, may Allah Azza wa Jal knows who has an ego and who does not. We all have, our path to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is a constant struggle. So I'm not declaring myself innocent of all of all sins. But at the same time, I feel like there's a certain amount of respect that needs to exist between a student and the teacher, and the student should never feel like they need to teach the teacher something. So these are things I needed to mention, because this will keep the atmosphere blessed. We need to know our roles. We need to know, the purpose that we are, our intentions. What is our intention? So, inshallah, may Allah make all of our intentions for the sake of Himself, for the sake of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and may Allah grant us tawfiq. And I apologize because these are. I don't think I mentioned these things, but in my other classes I had mentioned them, so I just wanted to go over them and then start the class. So let's start the class. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين. So we are, let me share my screen real quick. Okay, do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
Jazakumullah khairan. Okay, so here we have reached the fourth inflection. The fourth inflection is the inflection of al-jazm. Al-jazm. And al-jazm means to cut off. What does al-jazm mean? To cut off. So what do we mean by cutting off? We said that inflections appear where? At the end of a word, correct? Inflections appear at the end of a word. So what do we mean by cutting off? By cutting off, we mean something is being cut off at the end of a word. Something is being cut off at the end of a word. So that cutting off can be of two forms, like it has two types. The first one, the Mu'allif rahimahullah says, وَلِلْجَزْمِ عَلَامَتَانِ السُّكُونُ. As-sukun is the first one, and as-sukun means stillness. Stillness. And it is the opposite of al-haraka, which is what? Which is movement, right? So what are we cutting off here in stillness? We are basically cutting off the opposite. We're cutting off the haraka. We're removing every single haraka that would go against in stillness or stillness. What do we mean by stillness? We mean stillness of the tongue. So the haraka, when there's a haraka at the end of a word, there's an extra effort made by the tongue to pronounce that haraka, right? So for example, in this example, we have lam yaktub with a sukun. If there was a dhamma, it would be yaktubu. Yaktubu with a dhamma. With a dhamma, we pronounce a dhamma at the end of the ba, right? Bu. There is an extra effort by the individual to pronounce that haraka. But if we cut off that haraka, it will be yaktub. So you just pronounce the ba without any harakat. So your tongue or your mouth still remains still after pronouncing the ba. So that is why we call it stillness, right? There's a stillness at the end of the word. Lam yaktub, and this is the example I have here. Lam yaktub, which translates to did not write. Did not write. Did not write. والحذف لم يكتبا. والحذف لم يكتبا. And لم يكتبا is from so something else. I think I've mentioned this before, but I want to in case I haven't, the text that is in blue, that is the actual text of the book. The text that is not in blue, those are my additions, right? So for example, this is my addition, this is my addition. The translations, those are my additions. But but everything blue is from the book. Okay, so the author rahimahullah says wal-hadfu. So the second type of cutting off, we said what? We said al-jazm has two signs. The first sign is a sukun, and the second sign of cutting off, or al-jazm, is al-hadf. Al-hadf, which means omission. The omission of what, right? You may ask. So the omission of whatever that exists, something that exists at the end of a word. We said what? Inflection happens, occurs, takes place at the end of a word, right? So when we say emission is one of the signs of jazm, it's not that just any emission, right? It's an emission that takes place where? At the end of a word. One of those emissions we've already discussed, the 5 exceptional verbs. Does anyone know the 5 exceptional verbs? Does anyone remember the 5 exceptional verbs?
Yes, the father, the brother, the in-laws,
the mouth and the possessor.
Yes, very good. So that is beautiful. Because I asked the question wrong, the answer was
Okay.
partly wrong. So it was, but the answer is right because my question was wrong. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'll explain it right. So what I meant to say was, what are the 5 verbs? The exceptional part was extra, was incorrect, because we say the 5 exceptional nouns and then the 5 verbs, but I said the 5 exceptional verbs, so I kind of confused you guys. You guys just you guys heard the exceptional and you immediately thought of the nouns. So it was my fault. But jazakumullah khair, and I mean it shows that you guys at least know 5 exceptional nouns. Barakallah fikum. But what are the 5 verbs without exceptional? Okay, so if no one remembers, the 5 verbs are the and this is a good review for the quiz as well. The 5 verbs are remember I had, yes.
Sheikh, I don't think those 5 verbs are included in the slides. I couldn't.
They're not.
Yeah.
They're not. Actually, they are. They're called something else though. They're not called the 5 verbs. So I guess that makes it kind of confusing. Yes.
Aren't they yaktubani, yaktubuna, taktubani, taktubuna, and taktubina? These 5?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, those are the 5.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I wrote them down, but I haven't had them memorized.
Barakallah fikum. No problem. So that's good. So you guys know. So let me tell you where they are. They're at slide 32. If you want to refer back to them. But good news for you. And my quiz that I've prepared, there are no questions about the 5 verbs. So, or maybe bad news, because you now know the answer, but there are no questions about it. Yes, go ahead, brother Muhammad.
Are we going to use the application, or you have another way of doing it?
So to be honest with you, I didn't have time to set up the application. So I already had some questions ready. So I will just send it to you via email, and then inshallah I'll play around with the app. Is the app easy to use, or is it hard, Brother Muhammad?
I think it is easy to use, because I have seen like they use this app within the class to, you know, check and recheck how much they have covered. For example, they did they have learned hum anta antum. So then they use the app to ask the people question, list those pronouns, for example. So
Okay.
I think it's
Okay.
easy.
So inshallah, I will make an effort to set it up for the next quiz, bi'idhnillah.
Jazakallah.
But وإياكم barakallah fikum. But today we'll still do things the old school, the traditional way. Okay, so those are the 5 verbs. And now going back to our slides. Okay, so the example I have here is yaktuba. This is actually one of the 5 verbs without the noon, because we said, if you remember, we said noon is the sign of what? Noon is the sign of rafa. Noon is the sign of rafa. Noon indicates that noon at the end of one of these 5 verbs indicates that verb is marfu. And we also mentioned that how do we make one of the 5 verbs mansub? How do we give it the inflection of nasab? We remove the noon. That is how you make one of the 5 verbs mansub. That is also in one of these slides. So it turns out that with jazm as well, that's what you do as well. That you remove the noon, and that is what we mean by emission. Al-hadf becomes one of the signs of jazm, and al-hadf, one of the places that al-hadf takes place is at the end of the 5 verbs. How does that happen? How do we make that happen? By removing the noon. We omit the noon, and it becomes what? It becomes majzoom. Once you omit the noon, obviously you also have to look at the agent, because if the agent is an agent of nasab, then it will be mansub. But since here the agent is an agent of jazm, and these are agents that we'll discuss inshallah in the next classes. We know that this is majzoom. The noon is not here, and it is majzoom. Okay, so the emission has taken place at the end of a word. Okay, so let's go back to and talk about each in more detail. We said quickly as a review, al-jazm has 2 signs. The first sign is a sukun, stillness, and the second sign is emission, al-hadf. Now the author says rahimahullah, فأما السكون فيكون علامة للجزم في الفعل المضارع الصحيح الآخر. In the case of stillness, it becomes a sign of al-jazm in the imperfect verb with a sound ending. Now I'll explain the difference between a verb with a sound ending and a verb with a faulty ending in a sec. So I guess this is a good time to explain it. So there are 3 letters in the Arabic alphabet that we call the faulty letters, or we call the letters of fault, the letters that are not healthy. Those 5 letters or 3 letters are al-waw, al-ya, al-alif. Al-waw, al-ya, al-alif. Now here this is al-waw is basically this is how it looks like, right, in a sentence. And in a ya, depending on where it is, this it could either look like this, or it could look like this, right? Depending on whether it's at the beginning or at the end or in the middle. And al-alif is just something like that. So if you have one of these three letters at the end of a verb, that verb becomes mu'tal. Mu'tal means faulty. It has a fault in it. Why? Because it has one of the letters of fault. It has one of the letters of that indicate faultiness. So for example, if we had yad'u. Yad'u, what is ya? You guys should already know this. Ya is the sign of imperfectness, right? Anaytu, those 3 or 4 letters, alif, noon, ya, and ta, when they come at the beginning of a verb, they indicate that it is imperfect. It is mudara. So you know that this is a verb by looking at the ya. And there is something else I want. What do you see at the end of a word? At the end of this word? Wow, right? So this would be considered a faulty verb. Why? Because it has one of the letters of fault in the Arabic language, and one of the faulty letters, one of the unsound or unhealthy letters. An example for ya is yaqdi. Okay, question for you. What does this ya indicate?
That it's a verb.
Yes, imperfect verb.
Imperfect, yeah.
Yep. Yaqdi. So here again we have a ya at the end. A ya, we said a ya is one of the unhealthy letters, so this becomes an unhealthy verb. Imagine, think of it this way: a person that has an unhealthy heart, does that person become unhealthy as well because one of his body parts is unhealthy? Yeah, right. Because of the unhealthiness of one of the body parts, the person, you could say that person is unhealthy. The same here. Even though everything else is healthy, the qaf and the ya here is unhealthy. So the ya becomes the sabab or the cause why the whole thing becomes unhealthy.
Wait, Mr. Hell, I have a question.
Yes.
Are there like specific words that indicate it being faulty, like will be not good?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, brother Khadadin?
Does do we know like how many like letters give that faultiness? Like for
Yes. Yeah.
okay.
So, yeah, good question. So there are 2 conditions when we talk about Arabic grammar, not morphology. In morphology, it's there are some additions. When we're talking about Arabic grammar, 2 conditions need to be met for us to call a word faulty or unhealthy. The first condition is that it needs to have one of the 3 letters of one of the 3 unhealthy letters, or one of the 3 letters of fault. Those 3 letters are first al-waw, and then second al-ya, and third al-alif. So these are the 3. But there's another condition that needs to be met in Arabic grammar, is that these 3 letters need to be at the end of a word, because in Arabic grammar what we're concerned about is i'rab, and i'rab, basically inflection, happens at the end of a word. So what we're really concerned about here is when these 3 letters come at the end of a word, right? And then we call that word unhealthy. So these are the 2 conditions that need to be met. But in Arabic morphology, because we're concerned about not just at the end of a word, but the actual letters that the word is made up of. An unhealthy word or verb would be a verb that has these 3 letters, period, regardless of where it is, right? But because we're not studying morphology right now, all you need to know is these are unhealthy letters. Why? Or words, because they have one of the unhealthy letters, one, and second, they have this unhealthy letters appears at the end, so that makes the whole word unhealthy. Does that make sense, brother Khadruddin?
Yes, it does perfectly.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
Okay.
وإياكم. So Rama. Rama. Okay. Rama is what? Is one of the is a verb. I guess this is a past tense verb. That's why we don't have a ya or a ta or a alif or a nun at the beginning. So it's past tense verb, but nevertheless it is still a verb, and it has a what at the end. This is actually a ya that is pronounced an alif. So technically this would be like this, right? But I'll write it correctly. So this is a verb that has an alif at the end. And this is what makes it faulty, right? So we gave examples for all 3. Now let's go back to our slides. Inshallah, it'll make more sense now. So when we say when we say in the case of stillness, it becomes a sign of al-jazm and the imperfect verb with a sound ending. So now that you know what a faulty ending is, what is a sound ending? Can anyone guess?
All the other letters without this waw, ya, and alif.
Yes, very good, very good, very good. Yes. Jazakumullah khairan. That is exactly it. So all the other letters, other than alif, waw, and ya, these letters of fault, if they come at the end of a word, they make it sound. For example, here, lam ya'kul, he did not eat. The lam is one of the healthy letters, so this whole word becomes healthy, and that is why sukun becomes a sign of jazm for it. We said the condition for sukun to become a sign of jazm is for the end of the word to be healthy, to be sound. In this case, the end of the word is healthy and sound. Therefore, we give it a sukun. We cut off the haraka. And the author continues, رحمه الله: وأما الحذف فيكون علامة للجزم في الفعل المضارع المعتل الآخر وفي الأفعال التي رفعها بثبات النون لم يقضي. In the case of omission, it becomes a sign of al-jazm in the imperfect verb that has a faulty ending, and in the 5 verbs whose sign of rafa is the existence of an-nun. Now you already know about the 5 verbs. We went over them. Basically, an omission takes place when they become majzoom. So basically, if they have the inflection of jazm, these 5 verbs, the omission that takes place, you remove the nun. That is straightforward. But what we have not discussed yet is the imperfect verb that has a faulty ending. What is the omission that takes place in that case? So what do you do with faulty things? What do you do with things that are unhealthy? You try to either treat that unhealthy, for example, if a human being is unhealthy, you either try to treat it, right? Or you try to get rid of it. I guess not all the times, but sometimes that's what happens. So in the case of words, we cannot treat it. You cannot change ya to a different letters because that would change the meaning of the word, right? So what we do is we get rid of it in the case of cutting off. So in our example, the example that we had for ya, it was yaqdi with an alif, right? With a ya, I mean. Remember the yaqdi example that I just gave? Here, this example, yaqdi. You see how there's a ya here? You see this ya? So now what I will do is I will bring and add in front of it an agent of jazm, and we know that once we add this, this has to become majzoom. The word has to become majzoom. It has to take the inflection of jazm, and the inflection of jazm, we said for imperfect verbs that that have faulty endings, the inflection of jazm is done through emission, right? So emission, what do we emit here? What do we cut off? We cut off the faulty letter. We cut off the ya. So we just say lam yaqdi. We don't pronounce the ya anymore. And this becomes majzoom. Now this verb is majzoom. Does that make sense? So in the case of stillness, we cut off the haraka. In the case of hadaf, emission, we either cut off the faulty letter at the end of the faulty word, or we cut off the noon at the end of. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
So for the what you just explained, doesn't it happen in surah, many surahs, when like at the end of the verse?
So at the end of it, that cutting off is for a different reason. So that happens because every time we reach the end of a verse, you can either, if you want to connect it to the next verse, you pronounce the haraka, but if you do not if you do not want to connect it to the next verse, you just want to stop, you don't pronounce the haraka at the end of that word, the last word. But so that has to do with recitation. It is not necessarily related to grammar.
Okay.
Yeah, but that is a good observation. Jazakumullah khairan. Thanks for mentioning it. I think it may be beneficial for everyone else to know as well that emission of haraka, or that cutting off the haraka that occurs when we recite the Quran at the end of a verse, that is not that does not fall under any of these two categories. That has to do with recitation. It does not have anything to do with grammar. Jazakumullah khairan.
Is it possible to for you to give us a sentence from the Quran, Ustaz, as an example for these two, the stillness and omission?
Is it possible for me to give you an example right now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Or Ustad, you can add,
what just I have a question.
Just one sec, brother Radwan. Okay, brother Khadaddin, brother Radwan had a question before you. And then you can ask. Brother Radwan, what was your question?
I was asking like what just Robbie told you, Ustad. So can you just put that in the slide so that we can, when we go through, we can.
Maybe we can also, you can do it later for us. Maybe we can see it later, inshallah.
Inshallah,
yes.
Inshallah.
But
inshallah.
Yes, we can at least, when we go through the slides, we can understand that this is the example, and that will be easier for us for me at least, to remember, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan for this suggestion. Inshallah, I will do that. Brother Khadaddin, please go ahead. Sorry.
Would an example be Surah Al-Bayna, the first ayah, like the very beginning?
Which surah?
Surah Al-Bayna, because it starts with Lam Yakul Alladhina.
Yeah, very good. MashaAllah. That's good. That's beautiful. So basically that what Brother Khadruddin said falls under the first category, but introduces some complications, and it will require me to explain it, and it'll take us maybe 5 minutes to explain it, and I don't want to take up time from the quiz. But I will include that example for the sukun part, and I will include Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil for the emission part, inshallah. So those are two examples that you guys are probably familiar with. لم يكن الذين وألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل. So inshallah, those two examples I will include. But other than that, any other questions before we start our quiz?
None. I have one last question.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure you've explained this a lot already, but I don't think you have put it in the slides. It has to do with past tense and present tense wording. Like you mentioned it a lot, but like I'm still confused on that kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, Jazakumullah khairan. That is a good point. So what I have in these slides is the imperfect conjugations, imperfect verb conjugations. These are future. Basically, when we say imperfect and we're talking about Arabic verbs, we are referring to present and future tense verbs. So those are slides 28 through 30. These are present and future tense verbs. So you can refer to them. But regarding the past tense, you are right. I have not included the past tense verb conjugations. And inshallah, the reason I had not is because we will be reading the verb. We will be reading about verbs maybe in after 2 or 3 classes. So I just wanted to keep it until leave it until then. The reason we mentioned I included the imperfect verb conjugations was because it was needed to understand the 5 verbs that we have been talking about. But the past tense verb we haven't had a need to discuss it in detail yet. But inshallah we will do so in the next 2 classes. So I will add that, inshallah. Brother Nuruddin, right? This was Brother Nuruddin?
Nasruddin.
Brother Nasruddin. Jazakumullah. I don't see your pictures, and when you speak, there's only an N and a H. I believe Brother Nuruddin has the same. Okay, yeah, cool. So Jazakumullah khairan, brother Nasruddin. Inshallah, I will add that to these slides as well. Barakallah fikum. Any other questions? If no other questions, I will stop sharing my screen because all the notes need to be closed when you're taking the when you're taking the quiz. So I will go ahead and stop sharing right now. I have stopped sharing. I am going to send everyone an email with all the questions, but just to make sure I have everyone here. So I have Brother Mi'rajul, I have Brother, I forget the email address, Turju. Turju is Brother Muhammad? Or Turju, or that's Brother Radu. So there's an email address that you guys provided. It's TURJO. I don't remember who that is.
R.Turjo is my email address.
Okay,
R_Turjo. Very complicated. At yahoo.com.
Yeah. Okay. Jazakumullah khairan. So I have Brother Muhammad, I have Brother Fahad Haidar, I have Brother Radwan Bari, I have Brother Faiz,